Hi, everybody. This is Ted Price from Insomniac Games. On today's episode of the Game Maker's Notebook, I had a chance to catch up with a longtime friend of mine, Randy Pitchford, who's the founder and CEO of Gearbox. Because of the pandemic, we haven't seen each other for a long time, and it was fantastic to catch up in person. Randy took me on a fascinating journey through Gearbox's history. We talked about how Borderlands came to be and the lessons he and the team have learned along the way. We also dove into Gearbox's unique approach to publishing, and of course, we talked about magic. Please join me for a great chat with a true entertainer.
Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook, a podcast featuring a series of in-depth one-on-one conversations between game makers providing a thoughtful, intimate perspective on the business and craft of interactive entertainment. The Game Maker's Notebook is presented by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member-driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment.
Randy, thank you very much for joining the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to do it, Ted. I love the fact that you're doing this. This is really important. And I've been hoping to have a chance to be invited on. And the fact that we can sit down in person, I think, is a miracle and really cool. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, who would have said that a year ago, right?
I know, right? It was almost exactly a year ago. In fact, I was in Los Angeles on March 8th of last year, and that was the last time I was out. And I performed, I did magic at a show in Hollywood called Scott Nary's Booby Trap. And a friend of mine, we're doing magic at the bar. That was a Wednesday night. And there was another act in the show where these guys were spouting water fountains into each other's mouths back and forth. And I'm like, this act is never happening again. This act is dead forever. None of us will ever be comfortable watching it. And then the next day when I got home, I'm like, I think that's it. And then I gathered together my executive team and we decided to go work from home just instantaneously at Gearbox, and we immediately migrated, and that was it. And it's been literally a year. This is my first time out, and it's pretty crazy.
Well, for those listening, we're in Burbank right now.
That's right.
And Randy flew out from Texas, and it is wonderful to see you because I think we usually see each other at the various shows.
At the events, yeah.
But what was also, speaking of magic, what was so cool, last year you put on the Peacock Magic Show.
Oh, yeah.
For lots of folks in the industry.
Yes.
And it was another way for all of us to sort of get together and see each other.
Yeah. You know, that was a tradition at E3. Christy and I, there's a private theater in Los Angeles called the Brookledge Theater, and we put on a variety show with some of our friends from live entertainment, and we share that with our friends from digital entertainment. And a lot of people were just sad that wasn't happening because E3 didn't happen last year. So you know what? Why don't we try a virtual one? And that might have been the first one you saw, a virtual one. You should come to one of our live ones. They're incredible.
Well, I will, because what you were able to do, or what the magicians were able to do virtually, still blew my mind.
Oh, it's really fun stuff. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, as a performer, after this experience, I don't think I'll ever take an audience for granted again. Yeah. And I don't think audiences will ever take live performers for granted again. We can get kind of cynical, especially like in places like Los Angeles or like Las Vegas, where there's just so much entertainment and there's so many options, and now it's just been all destroyed. So we're going to have to rekindle all the furnaces and get the engines burning again and get all this live entertainment going again. My hope is when we're all vaccinated and we've killed this thing and we're safe, that it can be kind of almost like what, the Spanish flu led into the Roaring 20s. I'm hoping that we get our own Roaring 20s.
I think you're right.
In the 2020s.
I love it. That's you should write a blog about that. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any lack of enthusiasm for just people going back to normal. And I mean, travel, entertainment, all this.
I don't know if we'll ever be normal, but I do know that our thirst for entertainment hasn't gone down. Like, we felt this in the video game business. And how cool is that? As the world needed us most, our industry was there to at least try to help people find joy and happiness when they're stuck at home for a year through interactive and connecting online. And that's pretty cool.
I agree. And I think we've all been lucky in this industry certainly that our businesses kind of work no matter what.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I mean, we all had to adapt to working from home. I'm in your studio, and I can see, wow, there's no one here yet. Of course, like, my studio is totally shut down. We're all work from home, but it was surprising how quickly we adapted. At the beginning of that, I thought that everything was going to change, and there's so much uncertainty, so I'm getting very cautious. Like my immediate moves were very cautious and being like kind of trimming back on some of our risk taking and then focusing on that adapting to work from home. And then it wasn't too long where we're like, you know what, we're actually performing pretty well. All the metrics we have from like task tracking to check-ins, hey, we're actually about where we were before we went work from home, and we got there within a month. So I don't know, confidence just swelled.
and that's, I think, the nature of the games business as well, though. I mean, we all have to be flexible because it's not just the pandemic or any other, recent crisis that affects us. We are constantly dealing with a changing industry, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the neat things I think about what we get to do. And I'm so grateful we get to do it, where there's this technology component, which is science, but it's literally changing every year. There's new, and it's not just changing from, the hardware point of view. It's business models and the way we reach the people we're trying to entertain. And then of course the whole creative side of video games. I mean, it is art. It's totally subjective. So you got this hard science objective component that's constantly changing and adapting, and you have to live on the bleeding edge. And that's blended with this subjective, emotional component. There's nothing more impossible and more stimulating than what I think we get to do. And I just, it amazes me that we actually get any of it done.
That's right. I think we're all conditioned to it, having dealt with it for so long. And speaking of so long, Gearbox has been around for a long time.
Yeah, we're at 22 years now. So not quite as long as your studio, but we've been at it.
Which is incredible, right? Yeah. For any developer to be around more than 10 years.
It's weird though. I don't know how you felt when you started Insomniac, but we didn't really have like a plan. We just knew we wanted to make games, and we knew like the handful of us that started the company liked working with each other, and we felt like we had more to offer if we stuck together and worked as a team than if we just got jobs at other existing studios. So I had no idea where we'd be in 5 years, let alone 10 or 22. We just wanted to entertain people with interactive.
And was that your inspiration, just to purely entertain people? Or was there something specific that you really wanted to do when you started Gearbox?
I think that the goal is just entertainment. I think I, as we talked about, I was a magician before I was a game developer. And, I grew up with computers and programming computers, and that's always been a part of my life. And I had this weird kind of moment. I was working as a magician. I was paying my way through college as a magician. And I was working at this nightclub that used to be on Universal City Walk called Wizards. Do you remember it? You know City Walk, right?
I do. Yeah.
So back when it opened, in the middle of City Walk, there was this magic themed nightclub called Wizards. So I was there when it opened. I was a tour guide at Universal Studios. They're building City Walk. It's like, wait, that looks like it might be a magic club. I walked in there one day and said, hey, can I talk to the whoever's running this place? And I met the guy, and he asked me to show him some stuff. So I showed him some stuff. He asked me if I had a tux. I said, yes. I didn't. And then he hired me. And so I got a full-time job as a magician there. So I'm doing that 4 or 5 nights a week, in 8-hour shifts. I had a salaried job. I punched in, as a magician, but I was writing games and other programs as a hobby in my free time. So this weird thing happened. I uploaded this program I wrote, which it wasn't even a game. It was a tool that I was using to manage an online competitive ladder. I used to compete in like things like Warcraft and Command HQ and like some of the early stuff. This was all on CompuServe.
Okay.
Like this is pre internet. And so I uploaded this tool to the CompuServe modem games forum. And then I went to work at Wizards, and I do my 8-hour shift. And then I come home and I noticed that my program had been downloaded like 2,500 times. And I did the math in my head really quick, trying to guesstimate how many people I entertained at the Magic Club. And I'm like, okay, I was strolling in the bar. Let's say there was average, like, I'll say 2.5 people per table I stopped at. I spent about 10 minutes per table. I had a few breaks. I mapped that all. I'm like, oh my God, I just destroyed those numbers with just one piece of software. And I realized this is scalable entertainment. Like, it's so fun to like blow people's minds when you're there with them and you can see their reactions. But with Magic, I was fundamentally limited by the number of people in the room. But with video games, we can make something and it's like zero sum. Like you can reach however many people are interested and all over the world, which is incredible. And that was the light bulb moment where I think maybe I should be making video games. And it's a different form of magic. It's just a form of entertainment. We do all the same stuff.
So how did you go from that idea that there was a broader venue of potential fans and people to entertain, to actually starting Gearbox? Did you have a game in mind? Did you have an engine that you had written and you said, okay, let's use this?
No, I thought that video game, like, before you get in the business, at least before I got in the business, like you'd see like an arcade cabinet or you'd buy a computer game from Babbage's or something. And you think like there's some chocolate factory somewhere and there's a chocolate river and there's Oompa Loompas and all this magic happens. And then this video game pops out on the other end. Cause like most people, I had some skills that I developed on my own, but there's also some specialization there. Like I wasn't great at art. I can make a sound card make noise, but I'm not like a composer. You know what I mean? Yeah. So what I did was I started doing some research and I found that there are actual companies where people make video games, and I started sending out resumes and demos. And it turned out, I guess at the time, this was in the early, it's like 94, 95. There was a lot of demand. There was more demand for content than there were people creating it. Mm-hmm. So almost every single place I sent something to reached back to me in one way or another. And I ended up going down the path with a couple of companies pretty far. One was LucasArts, and they wanted to make a game in the Star Wars universe that was a first-person shooter, and I had been playing around with some stuff like that. It ended up being Dark Forces, but I didn't know that at the time. And the other company was a company called 3D Realms, and it's Apogee, and Apogee published Wolfenstein, which was like, Wolfenstein turned me from like an RPG guy into an action guy. That single-handedly did that. And so I was talking to both of them. They were both, we're negotiating. And I went with Apogee 3D Realms because, first of all, the LucasArts attitude. I don't know who was there. I don't remember who was there at the time. This was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Their attitude was like, maybe you should be paying us. You get to work on Star Wars. They were like so cocky, and their attitude was kind of shitty. Whereas 3D Realms, they were kind of down to earth, they seemed to me, and they also had a royalty program. They promised to pay me a percentage of the profits of the game, and I thought that's interesting, which was a good thing too, because like my salary was like $28,000. But I took the job and I moved out to Texas, and that was my first gig as a professional game developer, was on the Duke Nukem team. And I did a little bit of coding. I mostly did level design actually at that point.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot really quick. And that experience demystified it.
Okay.
And once it was demystified, there was no going back. And it didn't take me long. I think I was at 3D Realms for about a year, and then that's when I branched out on my own.
And what was the first step that you took in starting the company?
Yeah, so so there was a step in between Gearbox. If you're curious about what happened there, at that moment there was a lot of interesting things going on in Dallas. Right, the whole first-person shooter genre was being born there. Some friends of mine that I'd worked with on the Duke Nukem stuff and on this game called Prey, they founded a company that became Ritual Entertainment. Another friend of mine, Tom Hall, regrouped with John Romero from id when he left id, and they founded Ion Storm. And they're all like, "Hey, come with us, come with us." And that was all really exciting because there was a lot of activity at the time, but each thing felt like a little off for who I was. And then there was this other guy, a guy named Billy Zelznak, a genius programmer, just absolutely brilliant. He taught Carmack how to do real-time lighting in Quake. Like if you look at the credits in Quake, you see special thanks to Billy Zelznak. That's because of the lighting model that he gave Carmack. And Billy worked with me at 3D Realms, and so he started his own company called Rebel Boat Rocker. And his thesis was pretty simple. His thesis was, hey, come on, join us. Everybody's equal. We're all going to run this company together. Between us, we can all figure it out. And it was like, all right, hippie free love. Let's all, utopian, everyone's equal. So I decided to join him and to join his company. And he was the president of the company, and we all really kind of looked to him, but it was a terrible model. Like that is like, you can't, like, I totally respect, you can't make anything without teamwork.
Yeah.
But you also, there's a reality to time and space that requires, like, you need organizational structure for communication flow. And sometimes it's helpful for decision making. And it's also extremely helpful for specialization. And I'm a 20 something, like I still had braces on my teeth. I thought this sounds like, so I did it, and we got a deal, with, Electronic Arts, and, we had a budget, and we started making this game. And Billy was a genius, but he also, I don't think he was interested in being an entertainer. I don't think he cared about the customer at all. And I don't think he cared about the audience at all. He wanted to solve really difficult and interesting problems. So we never had like a physics system working in his engine, but we had like 5 or 6 iterations of the most unbelievable lighting in a real-time renderer that you'd ever seen, especially at that point in time. Like, he was miles ahead of everybody with, arbitrary polygons and lighting in 3D Engine at that time, like way ahead on there, but there was no physics. You know what I mean?
Can't really make a game.
Can't make a game,
yeah.
Exactly. So it took about 18 months before EA figured out that this probably wasn't going to happen, and they canceled our project. And I liked a lot of the folks that we worked with. Everybody, first we thought everybody's going to scatter. We all got job offers from everybody we talked to. We were doing some really cool stuff, but I talked to, there was 5 of us. I talked 4 of my buddies that I worked with at Rebel Boat Rocker into joining me. And hey, I think we should do this. I don't think we should break up. There's something special about us. We know each other now. We understand each other's strengths and know how to play off of them. And we've learned each other's weaknesses, and we know how to automatically mitigate them. And like some of these guys, like, I can communicate in just a look what someone I haven't worked with before would take paragraphs. You know what I mean? You know what?
Yeah.
You've been through this. And so I kind of said, well, let's give it a shot. And so, I got everybody in my living room and probably just ground them down and talked them into it. And then we did it. I hired a lawyer, and we did it was a total lawyer in a box job. With very generic articles of incorporation, founded the LLC. We didn't have a whole lot of money. I think all in, we probably spent $5,000 to found the company. And, we each put in $1,000 and that was it. And then we thought about, okay, what are we going to do? And we knew one thing: we weren't going to try to write our own engine. Let's try to work with something where the engine already exists. Cause that was an Achilles heel with Rebel Boat Rocker. Also, we're trying to build a company. If we do that at the same time that we try to build an IP and an engine and all this other stuff, maybe that's not the best play. What if we worked on a game that's within an existing franchise? And this was in January of 1999. And in November of 1998, of course, Half-Life launched, and all of us, and we're Dallas guys playing first-person shooters, and we're like, this is pretty great. So I got one morning, I got the guys together and I pitched them my idea for Half-Life Opposing Force. Like, what if you're one of those soldiers that invaded Black Mesa? And everybody liked it. It's like, see, the Half-Life engine's done. We know some of those guys. It's a Quake engine, so we're totally familiar with all the Carmackian style. Like, we know that code.
Right.
We know that the tool path. We understand that change. Oh, the other criteria was we wanted to be able to have a project that we could ship quickly. We wanted to finish.
Mm-hmm.
None of this like, okay, 3 years later, we'll see how we did kind of stuff. Can we imagine a project we can finish in 6 months? So, okay, an add-on pack for an existing game with an existing engine, that's probably a smart first move. So what was random about this is it was that night after I told everybody my idea for Half-Life. I'm like, yeah, I'll figure out a way. I'll call Sierra or something. Gabe Newell called me. Can you believe that shit? Like, that's totally fucking
karma.
Random.
Yeah.
Pardon my French, but like, he called me because he'd heard about from a friend of ours, Doug Wood, who I'd worked with at 3D Realms, who was one of the first guys at Valve. He did all the animations and stuff. And he brought he actually was with us at Rebel Boat Rocker. We were doing what were scripted sequences. Remember, we had no physics.
Right.
So we just canned animate guys, and we do it all canned. Because that's the only thing we can do. And he brought that idea up to Valve. And that's like whenever you see those, like, the scientists and the security guards are doing something and it unfolds and you just kind of catch it in front of you and you don't totally interact with it, but it's there happening in the first person shooter. That was the first time we saw that kind of stuff. That's an idea he borrowed and brought with him from Rebel Boat Rocker, and it's not because we invented that. We just had no other way to make a game because we had no simulation. So we were trying to fake a simulation through canning everything. Anyway, he I think told Gabe, hey man, these guys, Rebel Boat Rocker's gone. I think Randy's going to keep going. You should call him up because we need somebody to do an add-on pack. And I'm like, hey, have I got an idea for you? And he said, well, why don't you come up to Seattle and tell me what you're thinking? I said, that's cool, but I'm broke. So can you buy me a plane ticket and put me up in a hotel? And Gabe agreed to do that. And he flew me up there and I pitched him the concept. And he brought a couple other people in the room, and I'm talking to Laidlaw and some of those guys, and they seemed to dig it. And he said, okay, this is great. Here's the thing. We don't own Half-Life, and we don't have we're not at a point where we could finance this. So I'm going to call ahead, but you're going to drive down the street to Sierra Online, and you're going to tell them exactly what you just told me. And because, it was back in the day. He did a publishing deal like all of us did.
Yep.
And it took some time before Valve figured out a way to acquire the Half-Life franchise back from Sierra and, leverage their position and take advantage of the fact that they're the creators to get all that control that they deserved. But back in that moment, that wasn't the case. So I drove down the street and I met this guy, Scott Lynch, who was running that at Sierra. And then he brought Doug Lombardi in the room. Both those guys ended up later at Valve, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But I pitched them and they seemed to dig it. And he asked me, Scott asked me how much I thought it would take to do it. And I hadn't done a plan yet. I just had a concept and I had some guys that, amongst us, we could code and build art and make levels and do all the things we needed to do. And so I just cold clocked probably about 1.5 million. I hadn't even written a single thing down. He's like, well, it's a little high, but we could probably, let me work on a P&L. I'm like, oh shit, this is on. So that night in the hotel room, I, fired up Excel and I did the best I could to make out a real plan. And through some negotiation, we ended up closing the deal, and it was $700,000 is how much we had to make Half-Life Opposing Force. And that was our first game. And we finished, I was up there, I think it was at the end of January. We closed that deal in April. I think it was April 15th. And I was at E3 2 weeks later doing a demo of Half-Life Opposing Force with the level that I built in that time.
That is fast.
And it was cool. And I'm on the show floor demoing this game with code that was 2 weeks old at best. And stuff that some of the stuff I compiled the night before, just okay. That's how it was back then.
That's a great beginning.
That was 99. And that was the beginning of Gearbox.
Yeah. And so from there, that's what a wonderful way to start. And at what point did you all decide, okay, great, we proved that we can ship a game, even if it's not one that we created, we should do our own thing? Yeah.
Well, there was a few steps in there. I'm kind of a patient guy in that regard. Very crawl, walk, run, not just, get up and run. I like optionality, and sometimes I'm a risk taker, but I always do it when there's outs. You know what I mean? If I'm going to take a risk, there's going to be something else where if this crashes into a mountain, we're good.
Yeah.
So, we did a bunch of stuff with Sierra for Half-Life. We did Half-Life, and then we did an expansion called Blue Shift, and then we helped out with the Dreamcast version, and then we ported Half-Life to the PlayStation 2.
Yep.
And there was opportunity there, of course, but for us, yeah, we made some money, but we also learned how to be console developers. I still have a literal bronzed PlayStation 2 that Sierra sent me with a little plaque because it was the first console game that Sierra ever published. And I remember, I went out to Sony. This was before the PlayStation 2 launched. It didn't exist yet, and they made me go in the room that they had to put the handprint in, to look at the hardware and get the briefing. And I think do you know Tina Kowaleski?
Yeah,
she was our account manager back then, so
right.
she shepherded me through the whole thing, and so we managed to convince Sony we could do it, and Sierra seemed to they were making plenty of money off of our work, so they were happy to take some more risk with us. And Valve seemed to be happy. We were financing Half-Life 2 for them, I think, with we were doing literally all the expansions and all the console versions for them. So they were getting a cut of all that stuff. So so that was great. But each step kind of gave us some confidence. There was a moment when there were some seams in that crack. There were some cracks in that whatever the idiom is. When they wanted us to do the retail version of Counter-Strike and then do like a full original game within the Counter-Strike brand. And Valve pitched us. They were working on getting the IP back, and they were playing a game there with Sierra, and they were doing some deals with some other folks like Activision and Microsoft. And we did a deal with Valve. And Valve at that point, I'm sure they're so much better today, but at that point they weren't a publisher, and they didn't know how to have that role in the relationship, and they were absolutely terrible. It was a disaster. So, and it was at the same time that we were doing that first retail version of Counter-Strike that that I kind of realized I needed to get some experience with other folks. So I'm like, okay, let's try to do a deal. Who's the biggest and the best? There's like Electronic Arts, there's Activision, there's the first parties, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. So I did a deal with Electronic Arts, and we did a James Bond game for them. And I did a deal with Activision, and we did a port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 for them. And at that time, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was the biggest game that Activision had, and EA had bigger stuff, but they had no first-person shooters, and so they licensed the James Bond IP, and they were trying to get into first-person shooters. So I thought that was a great way to learn what it would be like to work with those guys, and they seemed to think that we were worth taking a bet on. So we figured out the deal, and we did it. And those games worked out, and everybody made money, and I learned a lot about what it would be like to work with Activision and EA, and got a lot of experience. I think those are the only deals we ever did with Activision and EA, but those they're running their businesses great. And it was along that time that I also did a deal with Microsoft, because they bought this company Bungie, mm-hmm. and they had this game Halo that they were doing, that they announced initially on the Mac for the PC, and Microsoft wanted to build a console, the Xbox. And they thought, okay, we'll buy Bungie and we'll redirect all the attention around Halo, and this will be the flagship product for the Xbox. And they were going to compete in the console world. And I thought Bungie was great. I love those guys, and they're really smart. And I thought Halo was a cool pitch. To me, it was always a PC game, so I got involved with them and say, why don't we help you guys? You have Windows, like there should be a PC version of this. Come on, let's do this. And we worked it out. So Microsoft did a deal with us where we made the PC version of Halo, and we're working closely with Bungie on that. And in the same interaction, that relationship was great, and those guys were great to work with, I thought, and it was pretty strong. And they also felt like maybe we should take a bet on Gearbox for this original stuff, because we had been probably starting in 2002. I was actually actively trying to get business development for a Gearbox original IP. Even back while we're working on Opposing Force, we're dreaming up stuff. So we had concepts and we had things that we thought were bankable, mm-hmm. but it's difficult to get these guys, especially, we're better today, but back then, like a lot of the industry where the risk was being taken were people that didn't exactly get, like it was a business to them. You know what I mean? And risk was a different equation than it is, I think, for people that understand the creative value of a lot of the folks today that are making these decisions. They're also gamers. There were no gamers back when this all started, because we were all inventing the industry together. But by the time I got into it, a lot of those suits were still not. They didn't get the love of the content. You know what I mean? So it was really hard to get people to trust you. But with Microsoft, I managed to get a breakthrough there, and we did a deal for a game that was codenamed Wargame. I actually had that deal both with Activision and with Microsoft. I was running them in parallel. We didn't close with
You were negotiating.
Yeah,
both, right?
Negotiating in parallel. And I pitched Activision first. They loved it. It's called Wargame. my sell sheet had the tagline, "In war, no one fights alone." Because my pitch was, when we did Duke Nukem, like the world is shut down until Duke enters the room, and then the monsters wake up, and then you have a simulation occur. But it's like there's only one character, and he's the center of the universe. And I thought, we can make the simulation feel a little more alive. We could use AI guys, and I was using war as a concept to do that. Like there's other soldiers, and you're fighting along with them, and so Activision loved this, and what was interesting was, while we were negotiating this, a game launched called Medal of Honor, and it blew up. And so now Activision was like, oh shit, let's really go, right? And it was a great deal. It was a great deal. And Microsoft comes over the top, and they offered like 3x the marketing commitment. And so I had to call the Activision guys and say, and it was Bill Anker. Remember Bill?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, Bill, dude, I would totally want to try this with you. I had a great experience with Tony Hawk. Like, this is the situation. What would you do if you were me? And then apparently, like, Bobby or Larry or somebody called Ed Freeze at Microsoft and threatened them to like not support the X. It was a big freaking deal. I don't know what that was, all behind the scenes. I just heard about this. They worked it all out, and I ended up doing the deal with Microsoft. And I think it worked out great for Activision because, the freaking, remember Jason and Vince? Yep. They had been kind of lured out to LA to try to do something with EA, but I don't know. It was taking so there's something about that. It was taking long or something. And Activision, now they did all this user research. They had all this people spun up to work on this war game with us, and then we just left. So that immediately went in the direction of that team, and Infinity Ward and Call of Duty happened. So how great is that? Like we got all these great Call of Duty games, and those guys like just have done so much for the industry, and we were just stumbling around not knowing what the hell we're doing. So we eventually, of course, that game on our side formed into Brothers in Arms, which is the first original Gearbox game. And you'll remember Microsoft didn't publish that. I had this cool out that I negotiated that the thing I was worried about with Microsoft, this is before the Xbox launch. I'm like, if you guys aren't the guys, like I don't want to be stuck in an orbit forever. I'm here to deliver content to customers. So I had this thing with me where we had this kind of plan where we're going to, there were milestones, of course, but I put in a couple where, okay, here's where we're going to like figure out our launch plan. And that was kind of like a go or no go, where I had a clear window where with the marketing commitment they pledged and all that, where the game was going to launch here as long as we pass this. And if there's fuzziness in there, then I can just get out and go somewhere else. So that time happened exactly like in the same exact week as Ed Freeze leaving Microsoft. So they were just broken, and they didn't even have the successor. And I'm like, what do you guys want to do? Like, I think you're cool, but I'm ready to go. Like, I've got a product here. We need to like blast, like we're past all the hard work. It's production time. Let's make this product and ship it. And they were cool. So I bought myself back out and I shopped it around again. And we did it great. Like the relationship with Microsoft was great. So that was one of those examples where it didn't go the way everybody planned, but everybody was super cool. And like, I felt good about it. The Microsoft guys felt good about it. And we ended up shopping around, and funny, like EA was looking at it, EAP at the time. And then Ubisoft ended up winning because they offered us their Shanghai team to port it to the PlayStation. Remember when we were with Microsoft, we had no PlayStation code, even though we had some expertise before from the Half-Life for PlayStation. That was in the PlayStation, of course, PlayStation 2 was massive.
Yeah.
That's where all the customers were. So we're like, so Ubisoft just totally, they stole it by giving us an ability to reach PlayStation. So that was the first original game, and we launched Brothers in Arms, and we were just some punk kid underdogs not knowing what we were doing. And
well, you actually had a lot of experience at that point, because what you had done prior in the 4 years was pretty hefty.
Yeah, there was definitely some crawling before we were walking. Yeah, I mean, doing the console versions of Half-Life was non-trivial.
And it sounds like you did a lot in a very short period of time.
Yes, we did. And the Halo work too. That was actually really tough stuff. Because Halo, I don't know if you know this, brilliant engine, and that like we learned all this cool stuff about data-driven design. Like the design, everything was data. It was amazing, but the engine that Bungie had built was was fundamentally architected as a synchronous deterministic engine, and we were going to try to make Halo play over the internet on a PC, where you need like packets are coming in out of order, like you need non-determinism and you need asynchronous simulation. Clients and hosts have to have different understandings of what truth is, and they have to find a way to resolve that with each other, because there's no synchronous. Like if you're playing on a LAN and you could literally not let the next frame on player 2 move forward until player one's input is collected, it's fine.
Right.
And that's how the engine was architected. So we had to basically recreate how the Halo engine worked, but make it absolutely Halo, like to everyone that's playing like single player or any version of it, it feels like Halo through and through, but we had to fundamentally change the architecture. That was some tough stuff. There was some pucker factor going on in there, and there was some good ninja stuff going on underneath the hood on that. Yeah, that was fun. And we learned a lot. And I think a lot of the lessons there, in fact, that we learned with doing data-driven stuff is what enabled us to later do Borderlands. We kind of iterated and evolved and really like took that concept of having data behind everything, and that allowed us to do all the procedural stuff where we can, tiny team can build a game with millions of guns in it.
Which I remember we looked at Insomniac pretty carefully, and we're big multi-weapon fans in our games.
Yes,
and
you guys are the best at that. Like
we were always looking at what you did and go, God, how did they do that? How did they manage to create so many variations of their weapons that are fun and unique? And so hearing you talk about the proceduralism behind that and the data-driven approach is fascinating, because obviously you were you're way ahead of us, and you're way ahead of the times in general.
Really quickly. And it was, there was a couple things that started it. We had that experience with the Halo engine and with Bungie's approach with data-driven stuff there, and that was really inspiring. We didn't do what they did, but it opened up our minds a lot. And then, there's this argument that happens when you start a shooter, and the argument is like, okay, what's going to be our shotgun? Is it going to be like the Doom 2 double barrel where you have a long cycle time, but it really packs a lot of punch, but it's close range only? It's going to be more like, maybe it's like the Painkiller jackhammer, or, higher rate of fire, but you're not going to get one shot kills. Like there's this, and it's a religious debate, because you can only have one shotgun.
Yep.
Because the keyboard goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's all the weapons you're going to get, right? And there's playfulness, like you're going to do the standard kind of things, and then you're going to have the hand, like as you get up in the numbers, you're going to do the goofball stuff, and that's where BFGs come from, or where you guys with Ratchet and Clank you guys did such cool stuff.
Well, we weren't limited to the keyboard.
That's right. You had different paradigms, and I'm being cynical, of course. By then we're already console gamers, but or console developers. So I'm being a little cynical, but it's hardwired from that old school. Like we came out of I'm literally in Dallas as Doom and Duke Nukem and Quake and all that is being invented, and so that is just hardwired in my brain. Sure. And half of our core team, that's where we all come from. So we had to it was like, well, what if we could have all the shotguns? What if we could have all the rocket launchers? Why do we with this argument stupid? We have this argument every time. What if we just had all? And it's like, oh wow, okay, how do we do that? So that we had this mind-opening possibility from the data-driven influences. This guy Jimmy, who's amazing, who really was thinking a lot about doing things procedurally, and he had a lot of great stuff there. And then just the designers not wanting to compromise, and that led to, okay, I guess we're just going to have to crack this nut. And I remember when we got, we made a bunch of pieces, like different materials and different pieces of models that we could assemble together, and we gave each of them properties that would affect some of the properties of how the weapon performed. So if you got this handle with this texture, those two things would affect some of the properties of what would happen with the gun and the barrels and all that kind of stuff. And we made all this content. It was kind of sloppy, but it was good enough where it kind of looked good. Because sometimes you prototype things and you reject it on more visceral terms, even though the design's solid. So we wanted to give it a good chance. We put some production value into this test. We got all these pieces in, got it all wired up. And I remember like, I was with Jimmy and he's like, just presses the P key and out comes one of these procedurally generated things. That's P for pistol. You start shooting, like guns are flying out of the body and they're all different. Like pick one up. It's like, oh wow, that feels like something. Pick that one up. And it all just worked. And it was like, how often does that happen? I mean, there's a lot of stuff leading up to that point, but usually there's another, some number of dozens of hours of like problem solving and bug fixing. But in this case, there was this moment where, and there was some of that along the way, but when it kind of came together, we all just felt it and we knew this is magic. We've done something that hasn't been done before and it's probably going to be meaningful. Let's give it the best platform we can to make that happen. And then then that's when all the universe building stuff. It's like, wow, if we're going to make a video game where the whole point is to kill people and take their shit, how can we make you a hero? So we had to invent a universe that could make it okay to be that guy, and that's how the Borderlands universe kind of followed the design.
Well, I remember one other thing that you did too that I was really impressed with. I remember playing Borderlands for the first time at E3 the first time you had it on display, and it was something. Maybe this sounds dumb, but just seeing the numbers popping off of the guys when you shot them made me think, wow, why aren't we doing that?
Yeah.
Because we were building.
Yeah, we did all that. Too. We totally stole from RPG style thinking. And honestly, there was a couple reasons why we did that. And I remember the fights I had with people inside of Gearbox.
I'm sure you did, right?
Because that was a religious moment.
Yep.
And here's what it was. There was, we were building it on the Unreal Engine and we were okay at it, but it never, the way the enemies moved around the environment never felt perfect to us. Like the way we were doing animation, they weren't perfectly grounded. It wasn't physics-based, animation. It was, we had walk cycles and we're sliding around the volume, and it's like, and so it kind of looked cartoonish. And our flinches, the more we do flinches, then the worse it would be for the gameplay, because when the character's flinching, it can't put you in peril. It can't impose back because it's busy doing a flinch. And so it occurred to me that, when we play RPG games, we don't care about any of that. We don't care about any of that stuff that we care so much about in first person. And it's because what we care about is the feedback loop isn't between like trying to simulate a real person interacting in the world. The feedback loop is between what is the capability of my verb and what is the actual mathematical feedback of that verb. And even though you can't like read the numbers or really parse it, your brain, it just changes the way your brain's parsing what's being presented to you. And it let us get away with murder. Because there's so much shit that's just absolutely terrible, and especially in Borderlands 1, that because we put the health bars and the numbers, it just changes the user's relationship with what they expect that simulation to be. And it was one of the hardest hot battles we had, I think, at Gearbox. But I knew it was right. And I mean, I think that kind of goes back to the magic stuff. To do magic, you have to know what's going on in the audience's mind when you're showing them your thing, and you can't assume that they're going to take anything that you've got with them. So you've got to kind of trick that mind a little bit into being okay with whatever, with whatever bullshit you're creating. I mean, all this stuff is fake that we're doing.
Of course.
So you have to make the audience okay with it. And if you don't meet a certain threshold with where the rest of the industry is, you're dead. So you have to kind of subvert that and find a way to make that okay. And that's really what that came from.
Well, it works beautifully.
We got away with a lot. I remember.
But I will say, though, too, it also works really well in parallel with what you were describing with the weapons, right? Without that, at least for me as a player, my weapon choices feel a lot more meaningless, right? So, and the immense variety of weapons feels more cosmetic.
And that's a component to it. We're also that's why it was such a neat, elegant thing, because it's signaling a couple things. That was the main problem I was trying to solve. But yes, it also signals there's a stat kind of component to this game. It's not just a reaction time skill test. it's also about your gear. And we did other RPG stuff. Like this was a really important thing that I just had to force. When you first come out of the entry area in Borderlands 1, the first objective you're likely to have will take you up the hill, and you can also go to the left and there's some skags down there. And all these guys are around the level, they're like level 2 or 3, which is about where you would be the first time you come. But if you go to the right, there's some guys over there that are level 5, 6, and a boss that's level 9. And it's just barely to the right. And you are dead. Like you can't, like it doesn't matter how good you are at FPS. You just don't have the stats to deal with that. And because they're right there and that confronts you, it kind of also, I have to play that. And people died a lot there, but it teaches them that they have to play the stat game. And then, the numbers being on there and the health bars, and like every gun has this item card, which has stats on it. And like, without having to walk people through a tutorial, it lets people kind of learn and discover that on their own and then play the game that we designed.
Which is, to me, that's the MMO attraction. Right, all of us who grew up or in our young adult era played MMOs, hardcore MMOs.
Yes.
Right, those are those moments.
Yes,
where you just get slaughtered, but
yes.
do you want to come back?
And then you can grind up, and then you're later a god,
yeah.
and it's the same guys are no problem when and that feels incredibly gratifying. And and what's interesting is that whole loop. That loop we feel whether we're talking about an MMO like whether it's World of Warcraft or or a game like Diablo. That whole loop depends on no Twitch skill at all.
Right.
Like when you play World of Warcraft, you're literally clicking on icons. Like when you play Diablo, you're literally clicking a cursor on icon. The skill to play the game is the exact same skill that was required to launch the application. Right? There's no, but like when you're playing a first person shooter where it's a whole different ballgame. Right? You have to like really be good at the Twitch. You have to master this idea of left hand, right hand. If you're playing on a joystick, if you're playing on a mouse and keyboard, it's the same problem. And that's not natural. You have to develop that skill. And even if you do, now like the juking, the timing, like all that stuff is really paramount to your ability to succeed in those skill tests. Whereas in an RPG, and what we did in Borderlands, you could suck at the game. And if you grind enough and get the stats up enough, you're just a god. Just like people just explode in front of you because you're just so overpowered. And that feeling of being OP is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And we love feeling powerful in our video games.
You do a great job of it. I mean, I think Borderlands is known for that. It's just over the top. And not just ridiculous. In the gameplay, but in the theming. Yeah. And the humor and,
It's a gift and a curse, frankly. I mean, I love that stuff and we can't help ourselves. And I'm really grateful that we found a way to make this kind of absurd universe we'd created fit with the art direction. We weren't there, we started more realism and we kind of found the art direction. And I'm grateful for all of that. But I also know it puts a ceiling on us. There's a lot of people that I'd like to entertain that I think would really love Borderlands, but they just can't bring themselves to get into it because of the art direction, for example, or because the universe at the end of the day is a space western.
You know what? We actually ran into the same challenge with Sunset Overdrive.
Totally.
It was completely polarizing.
That game was amazing, by the way.
Oh,
I love Sunset Overdrive. But I don't know that it's polarizing. It's just they can't parse it, or there's something wrong in some people's minds where it's like, oh, that's not for me. That's crazy.
Well, absolutely. It's the art style.
And if they'd only give it a chance, they'd find that game is amazing. Well, it's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. But that's the beauty of games, though, because we all can try these crazy combinations and see if they work. And obviously, in Borderlands, it really did work, and it is. We
got lucky a little bit, and we broke through.
Yeah,
we shouldn't have. The whole industry was saying we were dead. I remember there was one I still give him shit for it. Pactor on what's his face's show. I think it was Keeley asked him, "Okay, what do you think about this new Borderlands thing?" And Pactor goes, "Oh, it's being sent to die." Like, if you want an RPG, Dragon Age comes out a month before. If you want a shooter, Call of Duty comes out a month later. It's dead. Forget it. And later, I'm like, you never heard of Reese's Peanut Butter Cup?
Did you talk to Michael about that?
Yeah, I always bust his shit about it.
That's funny. Well, he doesn't hold back, right? Which is great. Yeah. That's what I love.
He's never been afraid to make the call, but it's like most things. You only need to hit. Like, you only remember the hits. You don't remember the misses. Yeah. When you're making calls like that, it's like magic mentalism.
Well, let's talk about the misses. I think that's an important part of all of our dev histories, is because all of us have made games that people have already forgotten because they weren't successful or have been canceled in mid-flight. Now, what have you learned from the games that didn't do well?
Oh man,
Gearbox?
I learned more from the failures than the successes, frankly. When it works, you think that you're good. And even your bad decisions become validated, which is like the worst the worst result possible. No, I mean, the failures are where we really learn.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the specific lessons you can remember applying from, say, a game that didn't do well?
So one of the things that I will do my best to never let happen again. We did this deal with it was after Brothers in Arms came out, and Brothers in Arms was a big hit, and it was really successful, and it got like great critical acclaim and sales, which is like, oh, it's a dream scenario. And so I thought, okay, here's the moment. I'm going to put a bunch of boats in the water right now, because you can't count on these moments happening. So we're going to obviously do more Brothers in Arms. We're going to milk that. And we had more to do, because it was a great game, but you know how it is. You're always compromising along the way. So it's like, okay, now that we've got credibility, we can do more with it. And loved the chance to do more with Brothers in Arms, and we had a quick out, and we did a full sequel. But the other boats I put in the water were, okay, let's invent another original IP. We have credibility now. We proved it. We can do this, and that's what led to Borderlands. But there was this other part of our business that was nice and kind of safe, and that was about working with other people's IP, and whether it's a licensed IP or expanding on some other work before, from porting Tony Hawk to doing the original James Bond game to, the expansions we did with Half-Life. And so I'm like, okay, what will it be? So we it was one of my partners, Brian, who like, okay, here's all the things I love. And because he wanted to direct this game. And the number one thing on his list was Aliens. And and that's one of the other things I like to do, is like people on the team, when awesome people get fired up about a thing, I want to figure out a way to let them have that, right? So Brian, this is like a dream of his. So we found out, okay, there's this relationship between Sega and Fox, so Sega's going to have to be the publisher. And I talked with those guys, and we worked out a deal. And we hadn't even signed the deal yet. Like it was long form, it was imminent, but it wasn't even like the ink wasn't even dry, and they couldn't help themselves. Like Fox and Sega, Fox was so excited, they wanted to like let their world know that their licensing business was good. And Sega was really excited to let the world know that, hey, they're making, they're trying to get into bigger AAA stuff and make some real bets. So like the contract wasn't even signed yet, and they announced this deal. And the second you hear Gearbox and Aliens and Unreal Engine, like everybody already designed the game in their own head. And like, so there was no hope for us.
That's so unusual, because we all tend to wait to announce anything, right? I mean,
like I didn't announce Borderlands 3 until like it was beta. And it sucks, because I know there's a lot of people we're working on another Brothers in Arms game, but I'm not saying shit until we have it.
Right.
And we have fans that really love that, and they're just going to have to suffer. But it was doomed, like I think from the start. And then there was a million problems along the way. I mean, it was really difficult. And I think initially we started with a budget of $10 million. And of course, we're immediately competing with Call of Duty as an action shooter, that they're north of 50. And so in the budget, I think, grew to like $17 million. And Sega was cool with that. And then we had Borderlands just worked. So we're good. And I'm like, you know what? It's important that we make this game great. So we invested, I think, all in $17 million of Gearbox money into this Aliens project. We never saw a dime. We never saw, like, it was just, you just flushed that money down the toilet. And not only that, but like there were a lot of people that were really unhappy with that game. Yeah. And it's tough too, because I got too close to it. Brian's great, and he was neck deep in it, but I also helped out, so I wasn't really objective. I thought the game was pretty good. I didn't think it was a 10, but I thought it was like a 7, which would have been fine commercially. But the problem was the other problem that it had, and here's the other thing. there might have been some language gap with Sega. I don't know, but I tried to tell them. So we had, Borderlands was a hit, and then it went into there was some complication I probably shouldn't even talk about that was all on not us. It was all on the publisher side. So that game went into like freeze mode for probably 18 months. Nobody even knew about that. But we did Borderlands 2. It launched in 2012. It launched in the holiday season, and just like, and it's like, 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s across the board.
Yeah.
And just killing it.
Yeah.
So this is where we're at. And I tried to convince Sega, look, man, you want give us at least a 6-month gap. First of all, like, we need all these awesome people to help. Let's like give us a little time. Also, like, you want as much time as possible, frankly. Like, the expectation is here, and like this is probably going to be a 7 out of 10. And also now we have all these people that think that we're the Borderlands guys. And if they try to get this other game thinking it's going to be anything like Borderlands games, like, it's not. So we had like a million expectation gap problems. And the game was what it was. Now, fortunately, there were some people that really liked it, but it was all over the place. And I think I should have been a little tougher with Sega on that. And I could have, at the end of the day, we control the product. We could have it just wasn't ready to ship. But we're professionals, and it was like really important. Nope, it's got to ship in February. And that was only like 4 months after Borderlands 2, which isn't really enough time
Not at all.
To move.
Especially when a game is doing really well.
Yeah.
Right? Because it stays in the PR cycle.
And we're post-launch. But it's just, even think about it from the development point of view. Like, if I want to get on my landing team over, like, I'm not, at that point, I wasn't 500 people yet, It's the same team that did all the landing and, post engineering and cert and all that stuff. And like, that's the same team from one project to the next. And it's just not enough time. Like, and when you think about back then, especially when physical retail is everything, like, that game has to, be done and certified and off to manufacturing 2 months before the shelf date, which, this is a shelf date of mid-February. Christmas, like, we're RTM before Christmas, like,
yeah.
So that was a really tough thing, and I should have been a little more assertive there, and I should have I just was trying to be a good partner, and it would have been a lie to say that it was impossible. Like, we're professionals, we can do it, and so I represented that sincerely and honestly. And Sega, I think they made a mistake that a lot of suits make, where in their minds the product is the same quality. This is the product, and so now what I have to optimize for is what's my best, like, marketing or sales window, but it's not the same product. It's not the same product.
So they're setting expectations that just can't be met.
Yeah,
right?
But look, we have a lot. We have a lot to. For me, the lessons are: don't announce before you know what you have. Give it plenty of time to polish and finish. And then I think the biggest lesson of all is that particular property, the expectations are everywhere. We made a game that was trying to be like a video game successor to the movie Aliens. And so all the people that like Alien for the suspense horror kind of game, we're just evil. Like, we don't get it, and we're the worst people in the world. And we've seen that door swing both ways, especially with that property. It's really weird. So you've got to, if you can't if you can't at least understand or have a plan that controls the expectation, the full field of expectations, you might get roasted. Yeah. And we just weren't good enough or smart enough to come up with an answer that could address that wide of an expectation. Our answer was too narrow. And, and so that was a tough one. So I think the other thing too is, and I should have learned this, I'm an asshole because I should have learned this lesson working with the MGM and the Danjack people on the James Bond stuff, because that's a whole different thing. It's like, don't work on movie licenses. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, you got, like, unless you have, like, they just can't tell you anything. Yeah. But the second there's any approvals involved or there's any authority involved, you're just going to get screwed. There's just, and that led to probably more of the pain on that than anything else. And that will always be like behind, no one will ever hear those stories. Yeah. But, and the James Bond one had a few of those too.
Well, it's tough when you have two parents, right, of a game, right?
Yeah.
And there has to be some, like you were saying at the very beginning, if you have a situation where it's not clear that somebody's in charge, right,
Yeah.
and making the final calls, especially the final creative calls, and it's not the developers, then
got problems.
Things can go off the
Yeah,
rails
decision
very
making
quickly.
is real, and if it doesn't, there is no who's right or who's wrong. It's like it's just you need a consistent
Yeah.
kind of decision making pipeline, because then you can trust that the goals at least will probably be consistent.
Yeah.
That's when the thing I like to say. I use this analogy with Gearbox a lot. I've been using it since we founded the company, where it's like, hey, you remember those rusty merry-go-rounds we had in the schoolyards? They're like the spin around, and you can put a bunch of kids on there and try to get it going. And it takes some effort, but if you push and really work at it, you can get that thing moving a little bit. And once it's moving, it's easier to keep it going. And when you get it going fast enough, we can throw their hands up and go wee. But if you got somebody like dragging their feet over the other edge or pushing it in the opposite direction, it's going to be impossible to move, and or hard to move, or there's friction at it, and it just sucks. And here's the secret of the merry-go-round: it does not matter whether it spins clockwise or counterclockwise. It doesn't. What matters is it's spinning fast.
Yeah,
and it's spinning good. So can we just all spin this thing in the same direction, and it'll be great for everybody.
I love that analogy. It's perfect.
Yeah, I've been using that one for 22 years.
So, well, it makes me think about your sort of recent foray into publishing, right? Given that you've had some relationships with publishers that have been pretty informative, and you have a strong philosophy of, when it comes to how to develop games, was that useful in starting up your publishing business?
Yeah, the biggest thing was the biggest reason why we started the publishing business, though, was because of my naivete. Do you remember when THQ went down and then all the property was auctioned off?
Yeah.
The Nordic guys, our new partners, Embracer, they acquired they acquired THQ brand and most of the catalog. We acquired one thing. We got Homeworld. And I love Homeworld.
Which is a great IP.
It's really great. It was the highest ranked of all the things in the entire catalog. And Homeworld launched in 1999. And when I was doing E3 with Half-Life Opposing Force, right next to me was Alex and Homeworld. And we toured together. And we did it again when we were doing more Half-Life stuff, and they did Homeworld too. So like there was a weird kind of like, it was just in my head a little more. And my partner, Brian, probably even more than me. Because he's the art nerd, and he really wanted, and so we're like, you know what, maybe. So I talked to Alex Garden about it, and some of the other guys, and we're like, you have my full blessing, do it. And I'm like, okay, so we did it. And my plan was, we're going to acquire the IP, and we can revitalize the back catalog, and because nobody could play the back catalog, nobody had attended to it in like a decade, and we can make new Homeworld games. And I thought, and this is great. It's a great property, great. There's clearly a positive business here. I'll just take this around all the publishers I know, and somebody will, we'll just, figure out who the right partner is, and we'll do a game. And, back then, and in fact, most of my career, money wasn't the problem, because you'd find a publishing partner and they would finance it. It's like an interest-free loan.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And I had to work with those guys anyway, because I had no access to the platforms. I don't have a publishing licensing agreement with Xbox or with PlayStation or with Nintendo. I don't have a direct relationship to sell to Best Buy or, back in the early days, CompUSA or Target or, any of those guys. And so I had to work with a publisher anyway. They're going to get their cut. And they're going to de-risk me, because they want to be the ones to sign my next game. So this is great. So I'm like, I'll take Homeworld around. We'll find the right partner. We'll do the best deal we can, and then we'll do it. And as I was shopping it, all these guys had the same kind of reaction, which is like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But here's the thing. We're all about fewer, bigger bets. And you know what we want from you, Randy. We don't want like Homeworld. Like, give us your big next AAA thing.
Right.
And you know what? I'll tell you what, if you do the big next AAA thing with us, we'll do Homeworld for you. And I'm like, you don't care? Like, this is beautiful. This is this incredible thing. Why does everything why can't this just be good in and of itself? And I couldn't get anybody to see it or do it. So, fortunately, by that point, we had done pretty much all of most of the creative marketing for like Brothers in Arms and for Borderlands. And 2K is a great partner for Borderlands, and they kill it in operational marketing. They've actually built out marketing a lot, where they're doing more creative marketing today than they did back then, which is really cool. But back then we were kind of doing all the creative marketing and they were doing all the operational. So we felt like, well, marketing's a big part of this. We're going to do a PC only version of Homeworld. That's, I don't need a publishing licensing agreement to make a PC game. I don't have to, convince Sony or Microsoft to let me on their platform. And so it's really just about distribution. And so, we could probably find a way. Like GameStop's down the street. I was the guy doing the road shows, talking to Walmart and Best Buy. I have their cards. I can call them up. We could probably do this. And marketing's probably the biggest thing, right? We did the creative, so the operational is it's just a checkbook, right? It's just buying the ad space and like, let's just try this, And Steve Gibson, who was at Gearbox at the time, kind of doing the marketing stuff, he was gung ho. He's like, yeah, let's figure this out. I can totally do this. I'm like, yeah, you can totally do this. Like, let's do it. So we did it. And it was a mess and everything went wrong. And like, we had no idea what we were doing and we had to learn along the way. And, there's a million lessons you don't even know you had to learn until after you're suffering from the fact that you didn't know them. But it turned out, we did a remaster of Homeworld. We spent the money on the development. We got all the right people involved, did a really freaking good job on the game. And then we tried to do the best job we can on the publishing. And we did a pretty good job and it made a lot of money. I mean, we're not splitting it with anybody. It's like, what the hell's going on here? And it was really fun. And we built all this expertise. So we're like, I think we're a publisher now. Okay, let's do a couple more things. And then we decided, we've got some things in the pipeline. Let's go ahead and let's go talk to the first parties and see if they'll let us have a publishing a PLA. And we talked to them, we showed them our roadmap, and they're like, yeah, okay. And so we did deals with them. I mean, it took us like a year and a half, but
that's fast.
Yeah, right, for a PLA.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of ground covered and unfortunately we also had a lot of relationships with all these guys because we've been around for so long. It's like if we were out of nowhere, I think it'd have been harder. But but it took us about a year and a half to get all our PLAs done.
I'm saying it's fast to start a publisher and be publishing on consoles and PCs and successful. That's amazing.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And then, we hired we got some of the great people to join our team. So we got direct relationships with the North American retailers, which there's a very small club of people that have a direct relationship with Walmart, a direct relationship with GameStop. And GameStop, when they were going through that thing, they even started consolidating. And I remember, I sat down with those guys. I'm like, it's really important to us that we maintain, because we're going up, and we're gonna be a bigger pipeline and more important part of your business. And I guarantee you, in a few years, we're going to be a bigger part of your revenue than other publishers that you currently have that you have direct relationships. Let's keep that direct relationship. We already had a direct relationship. They were trying to consolidate us.
Yeah.
And we earned it and we kept it. And and we're jamming. And holy crap, we just launched last year for Godfall on the PlayStation 5, literally the first game certified on the PlayStation 5 and the first game manufactured. Like, that's weird. Like, we are literally the newest kids on the block, and we were first out of the gate with the product. And it's pretty good. It's fun. It's cool. Those guys I love that developer. Those guys did some really coul stuff, and they got big plans. So I hope they like how well we did for them. And I told Steve, I said two things to Steve. I said, okay, we're going to finance this. We're going to do this, but here's two rules. One, we have to be the most developer friendly publisher on the planet. We have to be the publisher to others that we wished always existed to us. And two, if you ever call me into a meeting where we have to deal with the fact that a truck went off the road somewhere and we lost some boxes or anything logistics, I'm burning it all down. We're shutting it all down, because that's not why I'm in this business. I'm here to make video games. I'm here to entertain people. There's people I'm sure that love solving those problems. I'm not one of them. Get the people you need. I'm not dealing with logistics.
That's a good rule.
Well, those are the two rules.
Well, let me ask you about what you guys do different, given that you have so much experience in development world and having sat on the other side of the table. Tell me three things that you do that you don't believe traditional publishers would ever do.
Yeah. Okay. First is on business model. We we beg the developer to set the terms. Here's the model. It's transparent. Where do you want to land?
Yeah.
Like, who's taking what risk? We like a lot of our deals, 70% in favor of the developer.
Now they're probably funding.
Yeah,
a significant portion
yeah.
of it.
They're funding. But like if you talk about a game like Risk of Rain 2, it's an indie team.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
it's a small budget, and
yeah. They're killing it.
Cool.
Those guys are doing great, and we're making time, like a little bit, but you know, it justifies the risk. But and we're committing. You know, we make a marketing commitment, and you know, they see exactly that, and that's the other part. Total transparency. Total transparency. You can see everything, all the numbers, everything that's happening in real time, and make decisions with you know, if you want to do it something different, we'll go your way. The other thing I think is we're not trying to capture anybody. You know, throughout my entire existence as a developer, they want me to only do the thing I'm doing for them, or they want to acquire me. You know, and they don't want to acquire what's possible. They just want to lock down what they're risking on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when they talk about acquisition, it's not about, and that's what I think. I don't know a lot, but this is what I think is beautiful about what you did with Sony, because I think they're empowering what you're capable of.
It's a great relationship.
And I think like you guys are going to do some cool shit, and I can't. Oh my god, I can't wait. But and that's the nature of a good kind of thing. But a lot of the stuff that you know was coming at me was different. You know, it was really about controlling and like you know like Ubisoft was like, I don't want to you know. I think Yves brilliant, but like he like screamed at me because I was doing something other than Brothers in Arms. Like he couldn't. And like the best version of that is no, fuel me. Yeah. Like I'm going to create. I can't help myself. And everyone at Gearbox, we're just going to make stuff. Give us as much fuel, and we'll be with you, and you can enjoy all the benefits of whatever the value is that we create. We just want to make cool stuff and entertain it. Like my metrics for success are how many people can we reach, and to what extent can we gratify them. And it's a product. It's not like a sum, you know. So there's things we do where maybe we don't reach as many, but it's like it's really what they want.
Yeah, and
it's really gratifying to them. Or it's like you know the best is what reaches a lot of people, and it's super gratifying. But you know, we can. It's a product of those two ideas. And anyway, the I don't know where it's going.
Well, we're talking about what you do that's different as a publisher.
So we don't, you know, like we don't start the conversation assuming that we're going to own IP if we're taking risk. You know what I mean? Like we assume we're not.
Yeah.
This is the creators' stuff, not ours. And like we're open to, and even more open now. I think that we're did this merger with the Embracer Group where if you know, because there's some things that people don't want to do when they're, especially some of the smaller developers. There's infrastructure, and you know, it's like some of them might want to become part of us, but I'm not like that's not like the only way I'm gonna work with someone. Like there's cool, we're doing some things that I have no idea if it's going to make any money or not, but that's super cool, and we can help. Yeah. We are the right guys to help, and we'll try to do it in a way where we're not trying to hurt ourselves, and we definitely don't want any of our development partners to get hurt, but it's like there's certain things where it's like we are the guys for that, and it's also like bespoke too. So like for example with the Tiny Build guys. And you know those guys? No. Alex, Russian dude. They do some cool games. They actually, I think they just went public in Russia. Yeah. And I think his market cap's like $500 million now, and they're overnight. So they did this game called Hello Neighbor, and they're an independent publisher. They typically just publish digitally. This Hello Neighbor game, like it looked like it's cool, and there was a retail opportunity, and they had no access to retail, and so we talked to Alex, and he's like, all right, let's try it, and it is killed, and it's like total, like we didn't need the whole like worldwide rights. We don't even have any touch on digital. All we're doing is helping them have a physical box. We do a deal with the right product where they just want a cool collector's edition. And all we're doing is the collector's edition because that's really fun stuff. If the product merits it and it's worthy, like it can be a bespoke deal. It's not, and what it's really because it's driven by our mission is to entertain. It's not Like we don't have some strategy we've mapped out that's about, okay, how to get to a certain market cap. I don't even know how those guys think, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we just want to make cool stuff and entertain people. And yeah, you have to make more than you spend, because if you spend more than you make, the dream ends. That's the fundamental thing about how we survive as a business. But as long as that's true, then we should be doing this because somebody wants this entertainment, or this entertainment deserves to, get out there and it can reach people. And entertaining the world is what it's all about. That's literally the point. It's the entire reason why we get to exist. It's the only reason why we get to exist. And it's meaningful. This is, especially now, holy crap. Life is a mess. And I mean, there's a lot of cool things people do. Like, I'm great. Like, look at this building's amazing. The civil engineers that were involved, and like, that's a cool pursuit. And I like that, they can design things in a way to make this more convenient for us. And that, I'm glad that there's doctors and people in medical science figuring out things like vaccines so we can live longer and healthier lives. I'm thankful for people in security and law enforcement and even military that try to help us be more secure and safe. I'm grateful. I'm never for the bad ones, but for the best amongst us, for even politicians that are trying to help us be organized and figure out how to govern. All these things are noble. But what I think matters, the reason why life is worth living at all, the reason why we even care about whether to being safe and secure or even having a life, is because we can experience joy and happiness. If everything that we do is motivated by that hope that we can feel joy and we can feel pleasure and we can feel happiness, and if you take that away, if there was no chance of that, or if that didn't exist, who gives a crap about how long we live? Or like, none of that would matter at all. That's why suicides literally happen, is because that hope and confidence in the ability to experience joy and happiness goes for some people. And as a species, it's precious that we figure out better and better how to synthesize and create experiences of joy and happiness for ourselves and for each other. And, I didn't build this world where we commoditize, but it's kind of neat that we can commoditize the creation of joy and happiness, because then people like you and me can actually afford to dedicate our lives to the creation of entertainment for other people. And that's super cool. Like, that's a dream.
I agree. And it has been awesome hearing how you have pursued that dream. I feel like I'll never get there. Like, it's like endless pursuit. No, but that's a wonderful way to, I think, end a fantastic conversation.
Okay.
I appreciate your positivity and sharing so much about the history.
Oh yeah.
Gearbox. I think that's
thanks for doing this, because like, we're all losing our history.
Yeah. In
so many ways, the stories of our experiences and even our content. And that's increasingly becoming true in this digital world. Yeah. So we have to do more to preserve our history and preserve, because there's value to it. And there's people that are going to come after us. They're going to suffer through all the crap we suffered through. And maybe we can save some of them from some of it if they can just dig a little bit into some of the messes we've made. And maybe they don't have to make the same messes themselves.
Totally agree. I mean, that is the difference now in this industry. One of the differences is that when you and I were starting, we didn't have an opportunity to hear about the mistakes that others had made, so we could avoid making those same mistakes. And so today, I think, in all that you've shared, I hope there are up and coming developers who are listening and saying, "Awesome."
Well, it is certain that the game developers of tomorrow are going to just destroy us. They're going to kick out. They're the best game developer in the world 10 years from now is someone we don't even know yet, and I can't wait to play their content.
Me too. Awesome. Thank you, Randy.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for joining us for the Game Maker's Notebook. For more information on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, our podcasts, and our other initiatives, please visit www.interactive.org.